So this is like a really big story. And part of me, like in a lot of ways, this should have been like 3 or 4 different stories. But I feel like they really are part of one larger story. So, and hopefully that's kind of evident by the once I kind of get to the end of all this. So, Disney, this past week has really given an outline, for their strategies for the future. So, in terms of like the context of these announcements, which I'll get to in a moment, Disney has been struggling obviously for the past few years, but especially this past year. 2023 was probably one of their worst years in recent memory. I think it was like the first year in a long time that it didn't have even just $1 billion with a B billion-dollar movie, and it's been fielding kind of threats from activist investors. So if you're not well versed in this, essentially an activist investor is an investor who tries to acquire a large stake in a company with the intention of really trying to influence the corporate decision making and the direction of the company, right? As opposed to like if I buy some stock of Disney on Robinhood, obviously I still have some voting power, but not really enough to really make any major difference as an individual. And Disney currently has 2 potential, kind of activist investor war fronts, so to speak. So leading up to their shareholder meeting in April, and they're going to have their election for different directors for the board of directors. There's essentially 3 different slates of potential nominees. So you have the ones that Disney is kind of sponsoring and pushing for. And then you have nominees from Nelson Peltz and his company Trian Partners. And Nelson Peltz currently, controls about $3 billion worth of shares. Peltz, again, is an activist investor. He's tried to get on the board of Disney like 24 times in the past 18 months. And is really trying to transform Disney. Has really not been, this proxy fight really started even before Bob Iger came back and replaced his own successor, Bob Chapek. But again, he has not let up since Iger has come back. He is trying everything he can to kind of transform the direction of the company, even trying to get like Elon Musk on his side, who, as we know, Elon Musk has had some pretty choice words for Disney in terms of advertising on Twitter, or now known as X. And it seems like Peltz, he's identified, according to, Variety notes that Peltz has identified 5 key areas of reform. Corporate governance, streaming profitability, creative output, growth in parks, and the future of ESPN. And those are kind of his focal areas of that's where he wants to see the most change, right? So that's Nelson Peltz, right? But then you also have a third-party group, Blackwell's Capital. They have a much smaller share in the company, about 15 million worth of shares are in their control. And they generally support Iger and his leadership, but they still have 3 different nominees that they want to get elected. And a big thing that Blackwell's Capital has been trying to push is that they believe that Disney should be broken up, just broken up into different ventures, especially it's like real estate holdings. So here's a quote that Variety provided from Blackwell's Capital. Quote, Disney may simply be too complex for any one successor to Mr. Iger to manage holistically, and Blackwell's believes that it is the responsibility of the board to oversee these types of analyses in the ordinary course, end quote. And again, like I mentioned, in the wrap also notes, one area of this is that considerable real estate holdings. Disney, there's a lot of truth to this quote because Disney has become very unwieldy. The company grew so much under Bob Iger's tenure because in that, period of that first Bob Iger run, so to speak, they acquire Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Fox, and not to mention just expanding their pre-existing ventures. So I really don't think it's any mistake that Bob Chapek, who succeeded Bob Iger, failed. That's honestly, in retrospect, and even at the time, it really wasn't that surprising because, for better or for worse, Bob Iger created this monster and he needs to kind of tame it in a sense. Blackwell's Capital also thinks Peltz is a distraction. And Disney agrees, right? They say, quote, Mr. Peltz has not offered a single strategic idea that would benefit shareholders, end quote. So he mentions all these 5 different things that he wants changed, but doesn't really provide any, solutions. So why are these companies doing this? Are they really gonna be able to do like a hostile takeover of Disney? Not really, but the goal is ultimately to move the stock price, right? When the term activist investor almost sounds like an activist, like social justice, and in this it really is about the bottom line, like really feeling like this is a firm that could really be making way more money than it currently is. So and to be fair, the fact that this is it at least puts pressure on Disney. Bob Iger has to kind of respond in some way, right? And due to certain announcements or decisions, the stock has gone up about 7% since the start of the year. So all of this being said, right? All of this being said, Disney had its quarterly earnings report earlier last week, or in the middle of last week, and it outlined its metrics in terms of success. What it's been able to achieve this quarter in terms of subscriber growth and things like that, as well as offering, some specific announcements and strategies that should get shareholders excited. So in terms of their quarterly earnings, Disney Plus lost about 1.3 million subscribers in the final quarter of 2023. This was amid a pretty hefty price hike, so it's not surprising that some people have jumped ship, right? But the success here, at least the way Disney is spinning it, is that it narrowed its streaming losses by $300 million. So that's like the metric of success now in the streaming business is like, yes, we're all going to lose money, but how much money are we going to lose, right? It also, looking ahead, Disney projects of adding up to about 6 million new core subscribers to Disney Plus. And it also, this past quarter, Disney Plus Hotstar, which is like their India branch of their streaming business, added about 700,000 subscribers. Hulu, which of course Disney owns, or at least at this point has a controlling stake, and I think they're trying to get it all now from Comcast, but Hulu also added about 1.2 million subscribers. So there are some, there is some good news here for Disney, right? And they project that they're on track to reach streaming profitability by the end of the fiscal year. So, that remains to be seen. We still need to see, right? But I think the most interesting part of this are all these announcements that they've made. And that's why I'm including them all in one story. It very much feels like, I feel like you cannot just look at these announcements without looking at that context of the context of all these different proxy fights brewing, right? There's a lot of pressure on Disney and Iger specifically to really turn the company around and making bold moves. So here's a couple things that they've, announced. The first thing is pretty minor, really cracking down on password sharing. This has been in the works for a while. This isn't new necessarily, but they really kind of reaffirmed that. They've already started doing this with Hulu, and it's already in effect for new subscribers. So if you were to subscribe to Disney Plus today, these new rules would be in place. But people like me who, have been there from the very beginning, the total crackdown is going to start around March 14th and go into the summer. And I felt for a long time that this password, I didn't feel like this is what was going to save streaming. As when Netflix really started to tumble, I think it was about a year or 2 years ago. That was one of the big things Netflix said, is that they were finally, we've been circling it for years. We're finally going to crack down on people sharing their passwords. We're going to convert these, accounts that are servicing 12 people, and we're going to try to make those into 4 or 5 individual accounts. And that's going to help the bottom line. And I was very skeptical, but it's been really successful for Netflix, at least in terms of the stock price, right? So, let's see if this works. But again, I don't think this is I think this is a Band-Aid to a much larger problem. Okay, so another thing that they've announced, and this is not exclusive to Disney necessarily, but you may have heard that Disney is teaming up with Fox Corp and Warner Brothers Discovery to launch a joint sports streaming venture. Okay, so this would include ESPN, TNT, and Fox Sports, along with many other spin-offs related to those 3 kind of brands, right? This is slated for the fall, just in time for football season, though notably it will not feature Sunday night football or Sunday afternoon football, and that's NBC and CBS, which are not part of this deal. And the idea is to kind of have this one-stop shop for at least those three company sports assets. In terms of like pricing, the goal seems to be it would be more expensive than like a standalone regional sports network, which is about $20 to $30 a month. But less than a larger digital programming package like YouTube TV, which is closer to like $75 or $80 a month. So I would guess maybe somewhere in the 40 to 50 range. But that still remains to be seen. And Variety notes that this is an attempt by the industry and these companies to gain back some of those lucrative affiliate deals that have been lost due to cord cutting, right? Frankly, this is something that they should have done years ago. And it's surprising that it's just now it's finally taking these companies to just hit a brick wall when it comes to trying to make streaming happen. It's not gonna me girls like stop trying to make streaming happen. It's not gonna happen. I'm surprised that it's taken this long. Each of these three companies would own a third. It won't share the profits equally, as the Wrap notes, but this is very much a joint venture. It's very similar to the original creation of Hulu, if you remember, where Hulu was was kind of created by a handful of entertainment companies as a way to get their content on linear TV out to more people. But again, this is hugely significant. This is a huge deal, right? Sports is really one of the few reasons people still have cable or have cable packages, right? And people like my parents, again, we still, forget the password shit. We share accounts and stuff, but they still have cable. And I feel like sports is one of the huge thing that still kind of keeps people, tied to that kind of ecosystem. And again, between Disney and Fox Corp and Warner Brothers Discovery, this would constitute about 85% of the U.S. sports rights market, according to Variety. There's no Sunday night or Sunday afternoon football because I think just they were concerned about if you bring in too many services, it would just get too expensive and unwieldy. And something else interesting here is that this isn't just the games. It's technically the feeds of those linear programs as well. So potentially is also going to show non-sports stuff. Like if you went on the app, you could, if Family Guy is on Fox, you could watch Family Guy on this app. So I'm not sure how that would work, and that kind of makes things a little like less clean. But I don't know. We'll see. But notably, this is not like they're gonna suddenly get rid of ESPN as a channel, or ESPN. There's been talks about ESPN having its own standalone app. Those are not evaporating into nothing, right? They're still gonna pursue these other individual avenues. But this is really important again, this is huge for those older audiences who just want the convenience of cable. You know what I mean? Like there was something elegant just about you get this cable and here's all these channels. And that's it, right? Whereas now you have all the different apps, you got to sign in different usernames and passwords and all this stuff. So we actually have a quote here that I found in Washington Post. Pat Crakes, who's a former Fox Sports executive, said, quote, "This had to happen because bundling is part of the future, even if it can't look like the old bundle," end quote. And I think Pat Crakes there is really spot on. That ultimately there was some, the industry needed to be disrupted, but the not all the disruptions were necessarily good. That you need to kind of break the system and then kind of put the pieces back together, potentially in certain ways where it resembles the old way. Take what worked in those disruptions, but maybe return to something with the stability of like the cable package or the bundle, right? Okay, so that's one announcement. See, that's only just one announcement. Another announcement that Disney made is that they are releasing Moana 2, which comes as no surprise. But the surprise here is that it's coming out this year, in November 27th, for the Thanksgiving release. Which Disney has had a lock on for ages now. But I would be concerned if I was them because I feel like their last two Thanksgiving releases have kind of been bombs. With I think what was it, Strange World and then Wish this past year. So this is kind of interesting here. So this sequel was originally developed as a TV series, I believe for Disney Plus. But according to Variety, Iger was impressed by the footage so much that they decided to retool it into a feature film. Notably, this will not feature any music by Lin-Manuel Miranda, since I don't believe he was involved with this show that is now becoming a movie. And that decision feels like a huge misstep, right? Because I feel like the Moana, the film, is, in my opinion, fine, right? It's a perfectly fine animated movie, but I don't think that would have had the cultural staying power that it has had in the, I guess now, like 8 years later, almost 7 or 8 years later, without the music. I think the music is the glue that holds that movie together. You know, and that kind of ties into another point I have here, is that the move to do this at all feels really desperate. Not to have a Moana sequel, but taking this, what was meant to be a Disney Plus show, and kind of cutting it down and transforming it into a theatrical film. And again, it makes sense they would want to continue this brand. The original Moana made almost $700 million worldwide, and according to IndieWire, it was the most streamed film of 2023. Again, I think kids who weren't even, some of them weren't even alive when Moana first came out, but again, that music, I think it really is the music. I think if you cut out all the songs, I don't think kids would give two shits about this movie. But I think this move shows that they're really trying to move away, like, the big kind of allure of Disney Plus, in some ways. And this has been a thing since streaming really started to get in on, like, the original content bandwagon with, like, Netflix and stuff. But it felt like Disney was really putting, like, especially with their Marvel stuff, and they had a Monsters Inc. / University kind of spinoff. The idea being that these Disney Plus shows would be of film quality, right? That they didn't just feel like, you know, the red-haired stepchild of Disney. Like, these were, like, AAA quality, right? And, you know, this move to me shows that it's like, why are we going to waste all these resources on this Disney Plus show? Streaming is not what we had hoped it would be. We need to get back into that lucrative theatrical business that, you know, it's like they're a drug addict and, you know, they're going through withdrawal after 2023 because of their, you know, pretty abysmal box office performances. So, you know, they really want to funnel these resources back to the more profitable theatrical model. And again, it just feels desperate, right? Again, you can make a sequel, but again, I feel like, and along with making a live action remake, and it's like the film is barely even, it's not even a decade old, and you're talking about making a live action remake and now a animated sequel, and it just feels very much like, hey, remember this really successful movie? Oh, don't worry, potential activist investors, we're gonna make it again. We're gonna try to do it again. So that's another announcement. Another huge announcement that I think is the most interesting, though we don't have a lot of details about it, is this partnership with Epic Games. So Epic Games, if you don't know, is a video game publisher. They create Unreal Engine, which is like a huge, you know, tool that video game developers will use for so many different games in the industry. And they also, you know, are the people behind Fortnite. So obviously a really big deal in the gaming sphere. And Disney, they announced that they're going to be investing $1.5 billion with a B billion dollars into Epic Games. And we have a quote here from Bob Iger saying, quote, "This is their biggest foray into the game space ever." And then he goes on to say, quote, "We've entered into a strategic relationship with Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite, to not only invest in the company, but we're also creating a huge Disney universe," end quote. Spoiler alert, there's not a lot of details about what that Disney universe is going to be. I had a really hard time trying to figure out, like, what even is this? Like, you know, Disney's already, I believe, part of Fortnite in a lot of ways. But it seems like they're talking about, in addition to that, they want to build something new together. We also have a press release from Disney which followed up stating, quote, "In addition to being a world-class games experience and interoperating with Fortnite, the new persistent universe," that's like the thing, I guess, but I'm not sure what this really is, though. "The new persistent universe will offer a multitude of opportunities for consumers to play, watch, shop, and engage with content, characters, and stories from Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, Avatar, etc. Players, gamers, and fans will be able to create their own stories and experiences, express their fandom in a distinctly Disney way," annoyingly, "and share content with each other in ways that they love," end quote. So that's like a lot of corporate speak. So again, I'm not quite sure what this is gonna be. It's also funny in this announcement, Iger was like, "Yeah, I you know, some guy, when I came back to Disney, for my second tenure as CEO, I sat down with, you know, and we looked at the data, and gaming is huge with the Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and gaming's the future." And I want to be like, where have you been? It has been a huge industry, or a huge sector of the entertainment industry for, I would say, at least a decade, if not maybe 15 years, really going back to like that mid 2000s when you get something like Halo 3 and Call of Duty Modern Warfare and Grand Theft Auto. These games that were huge cultural phenomenons beyond just people who like games, right? In terms of, again, what this is actually going to be, THR seems to suggest that it's almost gonna be like a social network, like finally kind of capitalizing and doing some kind of like metaverse thing, not necessarily VR, but just metaverse in the sense of this, digital space that exists more than just like for game mechanics, right? Epic Games has been vocal about wanting to create like a true metaverse, though in some ways Fortnite already is, and it seems like, Verge notes that, it might be kind of similar to Lego Fortnite, which recently just released, and that's it shares the Fortnite name, but really is not, it's a push away from the battle royale style that Fortnite, is famous for, but has been kind of waning, I think, in terms of popularity. It's still very, very popular, but I feel like it's popular because people can't find anything else that scratches the same itch. So, again, I guess it's like some kind of like virtual world. Again, this announcement is overall fairly vague. Like, is this going to be like Disney Infinity, which was like a Toys to Life game, which I thought was really cool. It's like this crossover between all these different Disney-owned properties and stuff. And I never played it because, again, you need to buy physical figurines in order to like play certain characters. And so I don't know. And again, I don't even know if they really know. I think this is maybe like a half-baked idea that, again, that Iger was just like, let's just get this out there. We need good press, and we need to show that we're making bold moves, right? Another big announcement here is that the Eras Tour, Taylor Swift's concert film, will finally find its streaming home on Disney Plus. I believe on March 15th, Disney Plus will be its exclusive streaming home for Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour, and then parentheses Taylor's version, playing off of her albums that she re-released and re-recorded. And reportedly, Disney Plus paid more than $75 million for the rights, which on one hand is ludicrous, but at the same time, it's Taylor Swift, and like we talked about last week, she just won Best Album of the Year at the Grammy. She's like the biggest star on the planet. And, like the Super Bowl was just last night, and I feel like she was as much of a focus as the game itself. So maybe $75 million is actually a steal. So that time will tell on that. But, this will be an extended version of the concert film. There's already been an extended version that's been available for months. But this will be streaming, right, as opposed to VOD to rent or buy. And that was extended. This is like extended. This is going to have even more content. Deadline also notes that, this is far from the beginning of a relationship between Swift and Disney, right? This is a continued partnership. That's where she did her, I guess, kind of like a concert-esque film, Folklore, the Long Pond studio sessions, where she basically went through all of her songs from Folklore, but just kind of like in a studio setting. And also, Searchlight Pictures, which is under Disney, is set to distribute Swift's directorial debut. I have no idea what that film's going to be or what it's about, but clearly there's some kind of relationship here. So this makes sense that this is where her concert film would end up in terms of streaming. And then one final kind of announcement here is that there's the intention to invest about $60 billion with a base, $60 billion into parks expansion, right? And kind of really bolstering that brand. They really need to, going forward, they really need to be competitive with Universal, which just announced plans for a whole other section to their park. And I believe that this $60 billion investment, about 70% of it is going to go towards increasing capacity, right? Which has just become, my fiance and I just went to Disney about 6 months ago, and it was supposed to be one of the downtimes of the year, and it was still pretty packed. So clearly they want to try to make more room, not necessarily to make the experience better for the people who are there, but just to make it bigger so that, okay, it's packed at this amount, so let's make it bigger so we can pack it at that amount, right? But in any case, so all of these announcements to say, Iger also made clear, he's trying to assure investors that a succession plan is a huge priority, because obviously that didn't go so well the first time. And ultimately the Wrap actually notes that after all these announcements in their quarterly earnings report, shares actually jumped about 10% after this news. And Bob Iger said, quote, "Our strong performance this past quarter demonstrates we have turned the corner, entered a new era for our company," end quote. All right, Iger is really trying to sell this as, like, I know last year wasn't particularly great, but we have a lot of interesting stuff on the horizon. Please don't sell your shares, right? Now, like we said, Nelson Peltz had outlined these demands or areas of reform. Have they been met? Right? So a statement from Treon said, quote, "It's deja vu all over again. We saw this movie last year and we didn't like the ending," end quote. But I don't know. I feel like maybe not satisfactorily, but it seems like this 1 week has kind of answered all 5 of those things. So corporate governance, Iger at least has indicated that they're really taking succession plans seriously. Streaming profitability, that seems to be something that they're working towards for this fiscal year. Creative output, all those different projects that I mentioned. Growth in parks, they're investing about $60 billion in the park. And the future of ESPN, and they, in addition to the standalone app, they're creating this joint venture with Fox Corp and Warner Brothers Discovery. So, again, only time will tell. I'm sure Nelson Peltz is not going to be satisfied, with as he clearly made it very clear. But, only time will tell.